A brand new study out of Australia by a team of scientists claims that the coronavirus is in fact human-made and did not occur naturally in nature, as we have been told so many times over the past few months.
Convid19 virus was particularly well adapted to bind to human cells, and that was far superior to its ability to bind the cells of any other animal species.
And now another scientist has found that in fact the coronavirus is not of natural origin and contains protein sequences that appear to have been artificially inserted. Why do these scientists say this is true? Plus, today, for the very first time, we are going to unearth content from 5 years ago that demonstrated the U.S. government was in fact funding not just research into coronaviruses, but the manipulation of those viruses. And you won't believe the organizations involved in that and how they're connected to the Wuhan lab. We'll break down all the details for you right now. I'm Ben Swan, and this is Truth in Media. So we're taking a look today at this new study that's about to be released in Australia. 5 scientists there who are actually working on a coronavirus vaccine said they found some very strange things while studying the pathogen. They claim that what they found leads them to believe that there is almost no way that COVID-19, the current coronavirus that the world is dealing with, actually originated in nature and as the result of evolution, as the WHO and people like Dr. Anthony Fauci continually claim. Instead, they say it's almost impossible that it's not human-made. The preliminary report of the study, which is now being peer-reviewed, is based on computer modeling of the virus's ability to infect various animals, including humans. It was published May 13th on the Cornell University website, which is used for discussion of pre-publication papers. Nikolai Petrovsky, the lead researcher, said his team suspects human manipulation in Wuhan because of the unmatched ability of the virus's protruding spike to infect human cells. The virus's binding strength for human cells far exceeds similar properties for infecting other animals, he said in a statement on the forthcoming report.
So the study findings were very interesting, which is that we found that the COVID-19 virus was particularly well adapted to bind to human cells. And that was far superior to its ability to bind the cells of any other animal species, which is quite unusual because typically when a virus is well adapted to an animal and then it by chance crosses to a human, typically you would expect it to originally have lower binding to human cells than to the original host animal. We found the opposite. So that was a big surprise.
Now, on top of all of this, Dr. Petrovsky and his team also claim that there are other reasons that they say that someone tampered with this coronavirus and actually caused human manipulation of it. He says this, quote, "The fact that no corresponding virus has been found to exist in nature leads to the possibility that COVID-19 is a human-created virus. It is therefore entirely plausible that the virus was created in the biosecurity facility in Wuhan by selection on cells expressing human ACE2, a laboratory that was known to be cultivating exotic bat coronaviruses at the time." Then there is a new study led by Norwegian virologist Birger Sorensen, which has found that the coronavirus's spike protein contains sequences that appear to be artificially inserted. The researchers found that the virus had been doctored to bind to humans. They pointed out that it has hardly mutated since it began to infect humans, suggesting that it was already fully adapted to humans. Now, this report alone is pretty interesting, but what's really interesting to me is that several weeks ago, I was sent an article that I've been looking into, and it's an article that wasn't written a couple of days ago, or even in light of the coronavirus pandemic. Instead, it was actually written 5 years ago, and the title of it is "Lab-Made Coronavirus Triggers Debate." It was written November 16th, 2015. The article references Ralph Barrick, an infectious disease researcher at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who published a study on his team's efforts to engineer a virus with a surface protein of the SHC-014 coronavirus found in horseshoe bats in China. Essentially, the article goes on to discuss the fact that the U.S. government was funding coronavirus bat research for some time, and then in October of 2013, the U.S. government put a stop to federal funding for gain-of-function studies, with particular concern rising about influenza, SARS, and MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. The NIH had funded such studies because they help define the fundamental nature of human pathogen interactions, enable the assessment of the pandemic potential of emerging infectious agents, and inform public health and preparedness efforts. In 2013, the federal government stopped funding these particular research projects. Then in 2014, the NIH began funding a separate group, which we've told you about, Eco Health Alliance, which in turn began sending those funds to several labs across China, including the lab in Wuhan, for the study of coronavirus in bats. All right, so what do we know? We know that the U.S. government was funding this research into coronavirus in bats, specifically altering coronaviruses. We know that in 2013, that funding stopped. We know that in 2014, under the Obama administration, the National Institutes of Health, under Dr. Anthony Fauci, began funding another group called Eco Health Alliance. That group then sent those funds to various labs across China, including the Wuhan Virology Lab. This is absolutely, without question, proven. About $3.4 to $3.7 million flowed to those various labs, including the Wuhan lab, for the study of coronavirus in bats. And it was only this year that the Trump administration, after attention was drawn to this funding, cut off that funding and made the National Institutes of Health cancel their funding of Eco Health Alliance and the funding of those virology labs. The original article in Nature talked about a debate among scientists as to whether or not coronaviruses should be created in labs or even altered to make them more contagious for humans. In fact, it says this in the article: the debate comes down to how informative the results are. The only impact of this work is in the creation in a lab of a new non-natural risk. Richard E. Bright, a molecular biologist and biodefense expert at Rutgers University, told Nature. But then the article goes on to defend this practice, and it says, Barrick and others argue the study's importance. Quote, the results move this virus from a candidate emerging pathogen to a clear and present danger. Peter Daszak, president of the Eco Health Alliance, which samples viruses from animals and people in emerging diseases, hotspots across the globe, told Nature. Have you heard that name before, Eco Health Alliance? Because I have. Remember, in 2013, according to this article, the funding was stopped from the U.S. government to those studies of non-natural man-made coronaviruses. In 2014, Eco Health Alliance, the same company defending the practice here, began to receive funding from the National Institutes of Health under Dr. Anthony Fauci. So Eco Health Alliance takes that funding, which runs anywhere between $3.4 million and $3.7 million, and begins funding the study of coronaviruses in bats in a series of labs across China, including in the Wuhan lab. Eco Health Alliance, the same company that in this article in 2015 insists that it is of value to create non-natural coronaviruses that can attach to humans. That's what the claim is in the article, and we know that Eco Health Alliance began funding. Now, to be clear, we don't know that Eco Health Alliance was funding the development of non-natural pathogens and non-natural coronaviruses at the Wuhan lab. We don't know the answer to that, but we should know the answer to that. That's where this is leading us, to find out whether or not that is in fact true. Is that in fact what was happening? Because what we don't have answers to, and this is key, is what were our tax dollars used for at those labs? The $3.4 to $3.7 million that the U.S. government passed through Eco Health Alliance, which then passed to those labs, including the Wuhan lab, what specifically was it used for? The documents need to be provided. Members of Congress need to demand to see them. We want to know what it was used for and how it was used. And was the study of non-natural pathogens, was the creation of a non-natural coronavirus part of that research. So the question, coming back to these Australian researchers, if their research actually gets out, really comes down to the big question of whether or not manipulation, human manipulation, took place in order to create a form of coronavirus that would intentionally attach more easily to human cells.
If it was to turn out that this virus came about because of an accidental lab release, that would have implications for how we do viral research all in laboratories all around the world, which could make doing research much harder. And so I think the inclination of virus researchers would be to presume that it came from an animal until proven otherwise, because that will have less ramifications for how we're able to do research in the future.
Now, having said all that, we don't have the answer. But that's what scientists should be doing right now, is looking for these answers. As a journalist, I can only try to connect dots, but I'm not the scientist. The problem that we're going to run into, even with this report, if you watch it and you share it, is that you're going to hear from so many people on social media and social media companies that say this is misinformation. It's not. It's not misinformation. It is taking a look at what researchers are finding and then following that to its conclusion, whatever it might be. The reality is we might find that these Australian researchers are wrong. We also might find out that these Australian researchers are right. But for those who are in authority in health positions in this country to merely dismiss this as being untrue and misinformation does nothing to really take a look at the reality of what's happening here. It's also important to note this, that if what these scientists are saying is true, it raises an entire other series of questions about what's being researched, what kind of research is being done, how it affects all of our lives, and whether or not there should be accountability in that medical space. Because remember, the National Institutes of Health uses our tax dollars to conduct its research, uses our tax dollars to carry out all the things that they're carrying out right now. So there needs to be accountability for what they've done in the past, what they're doing now, and for what they will do in the future. We'll continue to follow the story, follow it wherever it takes us, because that's what journalists do. We know you'll continue to follow as well. Share this report if you would on social media, and we'll see you again very soon.